All right. Are we ready? I'm Alex Fink from Longwood University, and it is my privilege today to facilitate the panel entitled, "It Doesn't Have to Be the Dark Side: Administrative Leadership, Inspiration, and Support." Our panelists today are Karen Aguirre from Coastal Carolina University, Heather Belmont from Miami-Dade, Malcolm Hill from the University of Richmond, and Daniel Wubah, that you met earlier today, from Washington and Lee University. And as a means of opening with some introductions, would you each please talk about your transition to administration and describe your current role and responsibilities at your institution? And Karen, would you mind starting?
Sure. I'm sort of what Daniel called a toddler administrator. Well, as an administrator, this is my very first year as the associate dean. Before that, I was chair for 3 years of the biology department. My responsibilities, what we have is in the College of Science is it's split up into, there's a couple of associate deans. The other associate dean handles schedules, budgets, rooms, things like that. I handle student issues and new initiatives trying to improve the department, particularly with advising and a couple of other areas.
I got into administration, as I said earlier on. It wasn't planned, but an opportunity presented itself, and I jumped at it because I actually, in the department, I was quiet for about 5 years. I never said a word at departmental meetings. And what happened was, after meetings, some of the senior faculty members will come to me and said, "We realized that you didn't say anything, so you were listening more than you were talking." And so I was able to talk to them. I said, "Well, this is what I heard, and these are my thoughts on it." At the next meeting, I hear someone saying, "Oh, this is what Daniel heard, so we should be thinking about it." So that by itself helped me to the point that when I was invited to step up to the role as the chair of the department, I knew that I had some constituents with whom I could work. And so that's how I got into administration.
Is it on? Okay. Sorry. So Heather Belmont from Miami-Dade College. For those of you who might not know, Miami-Dade College is the largest institution of higher education in the country. It's a community college and very committed to its community college roots, although about 10 years ago we received permission from the state of Florida to start offering baccalaureate degrees. My journey into administration was not a typical journey. I actually started my career as in the industry. I started in biotechnology industry and had a wonderful experience in the biotechnology industry, but realized I really wanted to break back into academia. And at that time, Miami-Dade College had just received several grants to start a biotechnology training program. And I don't know how it happened, but I convinced individuals at Miami-Dade College that I knew something about curriculum development, even though I had never heard words like pedagogy and all that edu-speak that people talk about here. All those words that scientists had never heard of, I had no clue. But I convinced somebody that I could develop curriculum, and fortunately, they let me come in and take over this development of a biotechnology training grant, and I'm really proud to say that our associate's degree program in biotechnology has now led to our first baccalaureate degree in biological sciences. And so my entrance into the college moved me into administration, and I'm now the first dean of our School of Science, which I think that Daniel put it best. I'm sort of a grassroots leader because our School of Science is brand new, and I don't have any administrative authority. I have a very unique position where I really get to work with faculty in a unique way to try to create synergy across our 8 campuses, and they're here and they can tell you a little bit about that, but I think that through these grassroots efforts, we've been able to start some really amazing programs, which include things like undergraduate research and really some amazing support networks for our students that with the School of Science, without the School of Science, we would not have been able to do. So it's something that I think we all can be very proud of at Miami-Dade College. So that's me in a nutshell.
I'm Malcolm Hill. You've already met April, my significant other. And I don't know about you, but very few of us decide to go into the advanced degree field with the goal of becoming an administrator. That's not why we do this typically, or at least I certainly didn't. And so there's a lot of serendipity that's involved, and I appreciate these stories because they resonate with me a lot. I'm an associate dean, so I'm a toddler here as well, and I was not planning on this whatsoever. I had been chair of the biology department, also not necessarily part of my career ambitions, and had a sabbatical, and during that sabbatical we hired a new dean, and I chaired the search for the new dean, and we got along well, and she said, well, would you think about this? And I said, no. And that was not the right answer, and so we had a nice conversation, and she convinced me that it would be an interesting career path, and it has been. I've been in the dean's office now for 2.5 years. I've got another year on my time in the office, because there are so many jokes that are made about it. And I have folks, when it was announced that I was going to be associate dean, my condolences, that's too bad. And it's really unfortunate, because I will say that there are a lot of opportunities to make a difference. And so in my bailiwick as associate dean, I'm in charge of our annual review process, which at the University of Richmond is tied to your merit pay raise. So I'm a very I don't know how to describe how people relate to me after taking on that mantle. So that's a really nice part of the job, though, because I do get to read everybody's annual reports every year. And one thing that I can say, and I guarantee you it's probably true at everybody's institutions, there are a lot of really talented and phenomenal people that do this career. And so that's a real privilege of the position. And I also do our new faculty orientation program, which is the fun job. And then I'm in charge of 2 initiatives. The science initiative, which is an equipment, how to make equipment more available and in a logical way, and our arts initiative, where we're trying to grow our arts program. And so that's kind of how I came to be.
Excellent, very good. Well, thank you all for that. As you can see, our panelists come from diverse institutions and different types of administrative positions, and so this will be a really rich discussion. For those of you who are at state institutions like mine, you might want to follow up with Malcolm about what a pay raise is, but we'll save questions like that for later. So at various points during the Institute, we've heard references to faculty who are like lone rangers for a particular project or effort or a particular desire to change something. Based on your administrative experiences, how do you think faculty can be most successful in championing projects like that, one of which we, of course, hope will be pedagogical change in the life sciences? And anyone want to take that one first? You have the mic.
As a baby administrator, I will say one of the things that has been really pleasurable about working in this office is the science initiative that I've been engaged with, and from the administrative side of things, trying to find ways to help faculty achieve the goals that they have in the classroom. What is it they're trying to achieve? And then understanding the resources that the institution has available to it. How do you mobilize those in a way that is going to most maximally affect positive change in the classroom? And that's been a very nice outcome of the job that I've been doing, is that identifying some of those resources, and then transparently, which I'm not exactly sure what that means, but that's the buzzword, transparently making that process open and accessible to the faculty so that they can say, well, we want to do this initiative and it will, it involves this resource. How do we make it happen? And then just trying to find a way to make that happen has been a lot of fun.
We all don't have to answer, right? Oh, but you're all raising your hands. Oh, I can go quickly though, but I do think that, and we can say honest answers, right? What stays in this room doesn't leave the room. The cone of silence. I know. Finding a common enemy is a really strong motivator. And for us, when we were developing our baccalaureate curriculum, and again, I'm really glad I can say this, but you guys are not to repeat this, but our foe in the room was our university that resides across the street, and they were vehemently opposed to us offering a baccalaureate degree in biological sciences, and that unified us in a very significant way, and the curriculum that we created was extremely powerful and very different than anything we could have created. And we came together and we were extraordinarily unified. And Alex, you were with us when we created, as well as Juan, when we created that curriculum. And I think that was a very powerful way to unify faculty.
I think if you look at the academy, at the moment, we normally reward faculty based on the work they do. One of the challenges that I faced as a provost or even as a dean was if you want to encourage interdisciplinarity, how do you get a faculty member from history to teach with the faculty member from biology and the faculty member from philosophy? It never happened because the challenge was who gets the credit. So the structure that we currently have, challenges the whole issue. It actually encourages being a lone ranger because that's how we give our rewards. So that's something that I think fundamentally we'll have to find out ways to encourage faculty by finding ways to reward them as a team, if possible. I think that is going to be a challenge, but it can be done. There are innovative ways of doing it where you let the team teach multiple times, and if, let's say there are 3 of them, they teach 3 times. Each time they teach, one of them gets the full credit, but it has to all be set up up front, that this is how we're going to do it. So that Lone Ranger issue is something that is built into the academy, and we have to find a way to move away from it.
It's hard. They kind of said what I was going to say, which is don't be a Lone Ranger. You got to communicate. You have to reach out. You might even have to reach into other disciplines to find people to work with. And also, don't be afraid to seek a champion in the dean's office. A lot of times faculty don't realize that we're here to collaborate and to help. It's really a matter of communication, as most things are.
Excellent, very good, thank you. Building on comments that Daniel just made, you'll all remember that yesterday in our lunch plenary, Sarah talked about institutional structures that affect the implementation by faculty of new pedagogy. And with evaluation processes and the reward system, of course, being important among those, right? And so Daniel's just brought up the issue of evaluation and rewards. Would you please comment on faculty evaluation and its role in supporting or possibly impeding meaningful change?
So the faculty evaluation is generally, we have people do a self-evaluation, and then the chair looks at it and comments on it along with some other information and data that the chair may have. And it is important for the dean to make it clear to the chairs that we're really valuing innovation in teaching, and then the chairs have to be very careful that they don't just look at things like if the student numerical evaluations drop down a little bit when somebody first starts to innovate, that they show in their comments that they are giving high scores to people who innovate and realizing that it can be very difficult. They also, of course, could possibly think about being a little bit creative and ask for things like course releases or half-course releases for people who are developing new things.
I would say for faculty evaluation, actually to enhance innovation. Think of your hand. Look at your fingers. Are any two of them the same length? I don't think so. So what happens in most cases is this is where the department head can be very helpful, working with the dean, that within the department, each faculty member has a particular area of strength. So you may have someone who can pull in, let's say, 40% research, 40% teaching, and 20% that service. And that person will perform at his or her optimal level. So as the head of department or dean, it's always very helpful to find out people's interests and strength areas and then really encourage them, support them to be able to excel in those areas. If done right, that's one of the best ways to build a strong department, because what you end up with is you have everyone performing at his or her peak, and that is what it's all about. So not evaluating everyone with the same yardstick. You can have the different areas, but just be aware that you can't get each person performing very well in each area. And I think that has been one way by which you can encourage that innovation and that in pedagogy.
Wow, I really wish that could be part of us. Unfortunately, we work within a unionized system that has a very structured evaluation process, especially for, we don't have tenure, we have a process called continuing contract. And this has created a culture in our system, and one a common complaint that I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with, is that a lot of faculty members are very fearful to change the way they teach because they think it's going to affect their evaluations. And in fact, I hear this a lot, especially faculty members that have started to incorporate active learning strategies, that the students, the feedback plummets, especially that first time out. And I know, Ellen, this is something that you had happen when you changed your class. And I know that my faculty have responded that, inevitably the students are like, are you kidding me? Can you please just start lecturing again and tell me what you want me to know so I can memorize it, and just tell me what's going to be on the test. I don't like this active learning. This is just too hard, and inevitably affects assessment. And for faculty members that are going for continuing contract where a quarter of their assessment or that process comes into that self-assessment and the student feedback, that's very scary for them. I see my faculty that's going for continuing contract shaking his head. Yes, this is terrifying. And so I think we as administrators really need to be aware and supportive of the fact that, student assessment is often a beauty queen game, right? That students really are sometimes really rating faculty on, do I like them, as opposed to what I'm learning. And so we really need to be very conscious of that as administrators.
I agree. The only thing I would say is that so much of this is so local, so what matters to me and is true to my campus is not going to be true to you. But the one thing that I will say I have appreciated in this office, one of the lessons that I've learned, is that you as faculty, and I consider myself as faculty, once a faculty, always a faculty, what I've appreciated more now than I ever did was the responsibility that I have as a faculty member to educate me as an administrator. That doesn't quite sound right, but I think opening those dialogues, and I appreciated the comment about finding an ally or an advocate, if you can go in and educate and this is, my dean isn't here partly because my dean's, a religious studies scholar, but isn't part of this conversation. So how would she know anything about this? Any of my biology colleagues that are here would then, I think, it would be incumbent upon them to go and talk to their dean and say, listen, Vision and Change is a very powerful document, and this is where the field's moving, and these are the important things. And yes, faculty that take on these teaching endeavors might get dinged, or there might be consequences. But that's local to me. I think finding strategies that work on your campus are going to be local. But I think one of the most important ones is trying to educate the administrators about why what you're doing is so valuable and so important because of the demonstrated gains.
What's the next question?
All right, I'll ask one. Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, so sort of to follow up on that, what you're talking about is creating a safe zone where faculty have an ability to fail and learn from those failures during the process of transformation. And then there's a faculty evaluation, which is very important to support administration. But you sort of, at least at our institution, we've got this other thing over here called the Tenure and Promotion Committee, which has a tremendous amount of influence. Obviously, we've got faculty who are in different stages of that process there. That's staffed at our institution by senior faculty. It's a hands-off approach by the administration. So I guess my question to you is, what are your thoughts about how, is there a role or should there be a role for those administrators to the TNT so that they can accept that faculty may fail during the process of trying to transform a course or a curriculum?
And if you let me, and I think the role is really, in this case, is the chairperson who is evaluating that faculty member must take it upon themselves to make sure that in that evaluation, they take the time to explain what's going on. And that's what's absolutely key. And so that chairperson who's doing that, I mean, it's absolutely critical because, and I can't say it, that chairperson has a critical role in this, in saying, you know what, I went in, I did my observation, and I see the learning that's going on in this class that's completely independent of the student assessment. They're using these active learning strategies that tie back to vision and change, and so it's their responsibility to really make the story clear to the tenure committee that's going to see it. And also in their recommendation letter that follows that, there's an opportunity to explain these situations. I feel. And I'm talking to my chairs right now. Chairs. And they're back there, so.
Well, and another challenge in this, I think, and Malcolm and I talked about this a little bit at dinner last night, is that things like publications are very easily counted, right? But things like pedagogical innovation in the classroom, some of which are maybe successful and some of which may take some time to tweak and implement correctly, those aren't easily counted, right? And so we come back to Sarah's comment from yesterday. Yes, please.
Well, I would say that the faculty member who's doing innovation can also be very proactive.
Absolutely.
By providing assessment data. And if they're going to be making changes, they should be assessing. And if they have the assessment data and show that, there are measurable things that are changing in the right direction as a result of these, that's powerful evidence and should be part of the tenure package.
I agree. Yeah, and yes, you're right, and they have to walk hand in hand. And so the chair can provide powerful feedback, and the faculty also has to be providing that feedback too.
Yeah, I mean, the idea to me is always not to be cavalier about something like low student numbers when you're doing your annual self-evaluation, to explain what's going on. Explain, explain, explain.
Right, don't just put them in there and assume somebody's gonna understand.
Or put them in and just say something like, well, of course they're low, I'm a difficult teacher.
Or, I'm a science faculty member, all science faculty members get low evaluations. That's not an acceptable reason to have low evaluations. Or low pass rates, for the record.
Yeah, and also, I think it comes down to exactly what you were saying. It's very easy to look at numbers and then just quantify them and say, this person got 4.5 out of 5, so he or she is a better teacher than someone who got 2. At times, some of the best ways to determine whether someone is really doing what he or she is doing as a faculty member is the qualitative evaluation. When I look at, let's say, that's faculty reports, at WNL, we actually attach all the students' comments. I read that. I think that tells me more about the numbers, because the numbers can be very subjective. But at times, students will write things that are very insightful without they themselves knowing that they are telling you something. So I really tend to spend time on the qualitative aspects more than the quantitative.
Yeah, also, I presume the tenure, promotion and tenure committee within your department meets with you several times before you go up for tenure. You probably talk to them every year. That's a chance to me to educate them on what you're doing. Now, then you have the college committee as well, and I understand that its machinations are more mysterious sometimes.
Well, I think at small schools, you may not have that department or school-specific tenure promotion committee, but rather there's one that looks at the whole college.
I see, yeah.
All right, I'm going to ask one more question and then open the floor for all of you, so you might start jotting down your burning questions. And my next question is something that I think is a bit more personal, but ties into things that we've talked about off and on throughout the Institute, and actually something that Malcolm mentioned in his own introduction. So I'm curious to know if you've seen your professional identity change since you moved into your administrative role, and if you think that identity has changed from your own perspective and from the perspective of your colleagues. And then if you might mention, too, if you feel like your professional voice has changed in your role as an administrator.
I would say that I was a person who was dragged into being chair kicking and screaming. It was my last thing I wanted to do, but we were told we were going to go to an external search. Well, I shouldn't say we were told. We elect. We're not appointed. The department was going to need to go to an external search, and we were all afraid of that. So I stepped up. To my very great surprise, within a few weeks, I realized that I actually liked this because I was able to do things that I thought would be good for the department. The other thing is we had, you talk about being in silos. Within my department, we have the cell molecular group and the ecology side group. And I lived in the cell molecular group, and I waved at those guys, and I saw them at department meetings, but I didn't know them very well. Now, as chair, I can't be just advocating for my group or worried about it. I have to think about the ecology guys, too. And I actually learned a tremendous amount and made a lot of good friends. Same thing happened when I moved up to the associate deans. I can't just be thinking about biology. At each point, your horizons widen, and you can feel yourself growing. It's really quite an experience, I thought. And I now think about, I never used to think about anything in context, maybe I'm just dumb. I never thought about anything in the context of the whole university and what it was trying to do. I didn't really understand the pressures that the dean had on him. All I thought about was things from my point of view. It's been a tremendously different experience from what I had before, and it's made me, if anything, eager for new experiences. I think I was getting old and settled and tired and finished. I feel younger than I did before I became these different things.
I like that point, making you feel younger. I think one of the most important things is when you stop learning, that's it. And what moving to different positions has enabled me to do is it's always challenged me to keep learning new things. And so that has been to me, very refreshing. Now, with regards to my professional identity, when I was recruited to become head of department, I made it very clear to the dean that I wasn't ready to give up my scholarship, my research. So, and there were two reasons. One is I could only lead by example. I couldn't tell my colleagues to be doing research when I wasn't doing it or working with students. So I insisted on that. I said, fine, you can keep your lab and keep your work. And then, secondly, I also realized that there were times when I will be in the lab. This is when I moved to the associate dean's role. I couldn't do much research during the academic year, but during the summer, you could squeeze in some time to do that. And at that time, the assistant knew where I was. So I will be in the lab with students, and then I'll get a call. I had to drop things and then go to the lab, so I took to the office. So I started thinking about how can I still maintain my scholarship while still being an administrator, because it's very easy as you go up the ladder to get to a point where you keep moving away from why you are in the academy. It's the students, period. Everything else is secondary. If you forget that it's because of the students that you got into this profession, then maybe you're in the wrong profession. So when I realized that I couldn't spend that time with students as I wanted it during the summer on our campus, I started looking for alternatives. And I would say, fortunate enough to come up with a process by which I currently have a program in Ghana every summer. The idea was, okay, if I'm on another continent working with students, she will know where I am. She can call me, but she knows I'm not coming back to the office. So I started a program in Ghana in 2002, funded by the National Science Foundation. And initially, my plan was to do it for 3 years and quit. It's been going for the past 12 years. I'm currently at the end of it. I think next year is my last year in this current cycle of funding. And I'm probably be recruiting another faculty member to work with my wife. My wife is the co-PI on it. She's also, she's a developmental biologist, so we've been working on it. But when you lose your identity as a scientist, in most cases, that can be challenging because your credibility will be at stake as a scientist, as a leader. So I've tried to balance the two. It's not been easy. I've tried to balance the two, but I think you are more credible as a scientist, as an academician, if you can maintain that. Find a way. That's what I did, but I know of others who have been able to find ways to maintain their scholarship.
Thank you, Daniel. I think I'm still developing my professional development or identity. I feel like I try to reinvent myself every 5 years or so. But I think I want to focus on dispelling a myth, a common myth, I think, about academic deans. And a short period after I first got my job, we have 8 academic deans across the college because we have 8 campuses. And one of our senior academic deans was retiring, and we had a large going away party for this individual. And an administrator had gotten up at the front of the room and was, giving a toast to this individual. And they said, you're the first academic dean that I had ever met that truly cared about students. And that really resonated with me because I'm like, wow, there's a misconception that when you get to certain levels in administration, you're there and you no longer care about students. And so I want you all to know that my first priority is for students. And students can come into my office at any time, during any period of the day. Most of them have my cell phone. I have big baskets of food for them because at my institution, the majority of them sometimes don't have access to food. I still teach, and so that perception or misconception that academic deans, or once you get to the dark side of academic leadership, you no longer care about students. It's really not true. And in fact, I heard you, Daniel. I think that every single one of us sitting up here will say that we're here really because of students. So I hope that's a myth that we can dispel.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that other than you can lose your professional identity if you get focused away from what really matters. Because if you get too far away from the students, I think it's easy to just get focused on what department has what resource and how are you going to mobilize things. So keeping yourself fresh is really important in this vein. In this line of the academic professionalism that's out there. But I think it's an important, I've got one more year in my term. I'll be back to the faculty as of not this year, but next year. But I think it's really important for people to step up and do it. I will say that we're talking about professional identity. My professional identity has been enriched by it because I do have a different perspective on what's going on out there. And I hope, I'm not trying to recruit people to the dark side, I guess I am, actually. I am trying to recruit people to the dark side, because and it's not the dark side. It's duct tape. You need that side to have stuff stick. But it is a professional path that needs good people with hearts and minds in the right place, quantitative and qualitative. You know, I sometimes think, and I'm going to say something that's an anathema to a room full of scientists, but sometimes we get stuck on, you know, the assessment data and what are the, you know, the statistically relevant. There's also a really strong qualitative, and I'm glad Daniel mentioned that, the qualitative piece that we really have to pay attention to as well. We want to improve the quality of education. It's nice to be able to document that with some quantitative data, but at the same time, so much evidence is stacked up to the methods and the practices that we've been talking about that we're growing in sophistication about how we teach and how we get in touch with students and really help them learn. My perspective on that, I think, has grown in this position, looking at our entire School of Arts and Sciences and all the departments that are out there. So it's engaging, it's stimulating, and if you like complex systems, y'all are probably in that category. My guess is you do good work in this, so consider it, because we need good people.
Great question. Yes.
So one thing I didn't hear you guys talk about was how your professional identity has changed in the life of your colleagues, especially if you're looking in the state of the institution. And I'd love to hear a comment.
So actually, I meant to say something to that, because one of the things that I didn't realize, so I can't joke in the same way I used to. And I probably have said something offensive to somebody up on this panel, and son of a gun, there's the camera. Yeah, so I can't throw out jokes about, what was your annual report like this year? Oh wait, I control that, so I can't do that. And there's a power of language, right? And sometimes you can throw one-liners out there, and I think recognizing the power dynamic that exists, because as soon as you go to the dark side, what they're talking about is power. Right? And if you don't acknowledge that there is a power dynamic, I think that's where problems arise. And because these positions do have power. And I think you just have to acknowledge that, and you have to recognize it. And I have had weird situations where I'll be talking to people that I've been working with for a decade, and I'll say something, they'll be like, "You're taking away my..." No, that's not what I'm saying. So I have had some interesting interactions that, just because of the nature of the position, that have changed their relationship with me professionally. I think in terms of buddies and chums and friendly people, we're still okay, but they look at me a little bit.
And he still has his wife, fortunately. For me, it's interesting because when I was a chair, I actually had more administrative power than I do now as an academic dean. And so, you know, Daniel actually witnessed it. My chairs probably joke with me more now than they used to. But I actually feel really invigorated by this position because, again, I think that we've been able to accomplish a lot because for the first time in the college's history, we've been able to be unified under a single umbrella. We used to be 8 separate campuses that had 8 individual departments that functioned completely independently, didn't really talk to one another, and now under a single entity, all the faculty get to communicate, have the same professional development opportunities, and so I really think that there's a lot more unity than there used to be.
I think your question about how my colleagues look at me, I'm looking at it broadly in terms of, professionals, in terms of my colleagues, let's say other microbiologists, and that's where, for example, it's very important to maintain your scholarship because, when you start and as a faculty member, you're teaching, your scholarship, it's kind of part of your identity. And as I sit here now, this past year, I published 4 papers in 2013. It's based on work that I'm doing with other people. So I think I've been able to save that part. But one thing that I learned when I was appointed head of department was that you mentioned power. I look at it as they perceive it as power, but in most cases you are powerless. Because the truth is, as a dean, as a provost, as a head, you get things done only by working with people. That's your colleagues. They get it done, okay? And your role, in most cases, is to be the conductor, to be able to, tell when, the trombone should play and when the sax should lead. And that is the role of, that's an administrator. And that is what I'm always mindful of, because I know that by myself, I can't get much done. So professionally, I put myself in a situation where my colleagues would at least allow me to exert influence on them. That's the way I look at it. That's be able to influence what they are doing, be able to, they come to me, with questions, assuming that I have all the answers. And there are times that, I don't have the answers. And I always say this to my direct reports, that the day I know more about your area than you do, I'm not doing my work. Because, I have the registrar, I have the chief technology officer, I have the dean of a college. If I know more about what's going on in the college than the dean, that dean is ineffective. He or she should be the one who would feed me with information. That person should know more about that. So professionally, that kind of, dynamics with the people with whom I work. And when you become an administrator, remember, you said that, you're a faculty. I always remind my colleagues that I'm a faculty before I'm an administrator. I don't want to forget that. If I have to go back to the classroom tomorrow, I'm ready to go. Some people get into the trap of you become an administrator, so you think that is it. No. I will be willing to go back to the classroom tomorrow if I want to go. That is being a good administrator, and that's that kind of relationship. So the faculty part, and then the professional where you work with, let's say, non-academics, and I pay attention to both of them, remembering that they make things happen. I just serve as the conductor.
Yeah, I think I would totally lose credibility with the faculty if I did still teach. It's important to still teach. And if you have to carve out some time for your research, one of the administrator mostly has to say, yes, I will help. Yes, I will work on that grant with you. Yes, I will do this, but you have to say no occasionally. And you just have to be a little bit guarded of who you are and that you still have time to do things that were important to you in the first place. Also, I thought that one of my biggest fears was that I wouldn't get to have as much student contact, but I have more student contact now. Unfortunately, since I handle the suspension appeals and things like that, it's not always the same cohort of students. But, I thought about that, and I thought, I'm going to start a tutorial for biology honors students where they can come in and I will give them some extra help and kind of a tutorial like the British do. They can come in and sit and talk to me about how their project is going. And I'm there as a resource for them because I wanted to talk to some students who were not in some horrible difficulty. And also I have the fun of reading their papers and hearing what's going on in their projects. So that was a way of carving out a little space for myself, and I'm very jealous of that space. So I make sure I keep it.
Great, thank you. Other questions? What's the next one? Yes, Ellen.
Some administrators I've talked to in the past say that it can be very lonely. And I think that's part of the sort of the professional identity piece that maybe that question was getting to a little bit. That I think, when you come to have coffee or lunch with someone, they may be more on their guard than you prefer them to be, and therefore they're closing themselves off from you in ways that maybe they didn't before. Is that a common, and it doesn't have to be more than a yes or no, I'm just kind of curious about whether or not sometimes you feel a little lonely.
In terms of what Malcolm was saying, every once in a while I'm talking to somebody who I've known for a million years and I notice they're not responding in the same way that they used to. And at first I thought, what a jerk. I'm still the same person. And then after it happened a while, I started thinking, well, maybe I'm being the jerk. Maybe I'm not realizing that this dynamic has changed a little bit for them and there are things that I'm saying or doing that are inappropriate and are making them uncomfortable. And yeah, that's kind of a drag.
Well, being lonely every now and then, it does happen when you have to make the call. Because, there are certain decisions that are not made by committees, and you have to decide. And you know that whatever you say can be the up or down vote. So that becomes a challenge every now and then.
Yeah, I think inevitably there's going to be times when, as an administrator, you're going to feel like you're on the outside because of a decision that you have to make. But I think that for the most part, it's a wonderful job because you can effectuate so much change, especially if you are given an opportunity to work collaboratively with the faculty and hope that they see you as somebody that can help them make change happen as opposed to work against it.
The only thing I'd add is that I think when I said that it would, you as faculty and me as faculty talking to the administrators to educate them is kind of a plea in that regard, because I think it can be a little bit isolating in the dean's office. If you can schedule some time to break that barrier as faculty, because you know a lot, that actually will help break down the isolation piece, because most of the administrators that I know started as faculty, and then they said, what the hell happened? How did I get here? And keep that in mind, because these are folks that really do care, at least most of them, and are warm-blooded, and are looking for that dialogue.
And also, and when we're reaching out, we're really reaching out, and if we put out there that we've put out a request for proposals or other ways, we're serious about these things, and so respond to us. We're here to help.